Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts with the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan, back for this Locked On Texas Tech special edition. Voices from the YouTube comments. Love to hear what you guys are chopping up every week, and we've plucked a few thoughts to consider on today's program. Chris, let's get started with comment number one. This is from You Call It 99989. Saw a national ranking on toughest places to play from EA Sports. What does that list look like in the Big 12 Conference? And you're the right man to ask, Chris. I know you hadn't seen every place just yet as far as some of the new additions, but have gotten a heavy dose over the years and got to see some new locales since the first four came on board. So what are some that jump out to you when this question's asked?
You know, it's funny now that you say that there's very few that I have not seen. I've not been to University of Utah. I have not seen a football game at Central Florida. I have not been to Cincinnati. I think I've been to everywhere else though. I've been to Colorado. I've been to Arizona. I've been to Arizona State, and then obviously with Utah being the new ones, and then of the new ones last year, I'd already been to Houston, been to BYU. Had not been to Central Florida, and then so I think there's really just three of the programs that I've not been at a game at and experienced it through a tech lens, obviously, and that factors into this deal. Yeah, the folks at EA Sports, it's been kind of funny because they have put out a ton of lists. I think some of the lists have been a bit off, and we can get into that of this particular list that they're referring to, because it had A&M listed as number one. I think LSU was listed at like third or fourth, and I think a lot of people had issue with that. Alabama,
A&M 24-20 in SEC play on their home field. It's so damn tough they can't even win.
Yeah, and Alabama was number two, and I think most people would say that's more of a wine and cheese crowd. But I think it had to do with how often you win, and then the crowd and a combination of all that stuff. Anyway, but the folks at EA they're the ones winning here because they're creating all this conversation and marketing their video game like crazy, even though they're just sitting back kind of laughing at all the controversy and chaos that they're starting, basically because they put a graphic on in all reality. I think when people looked at that list, it was discussed. I heard a lot of conversations about it. I was curious about where some of the Big 12 schools would be on it, and there wasn't a whole lot of representation there, and I understand that. I think there was a time, if you do a similar list in the late 2000s or early 2010s, Lubbock had quite the reputation, and I think that the last decade you heard that a lot. Yeah. I think you've started to help yourself in this area in recent seasons, but you still have a long way to go to get to where it is nationally. Virginia Tech was also similar. Virginia Tech used to be a nightmare to play at when Frank Beamer was there. Enter Sandman, and they talk about all these things. They've been so bad over the last decade plus that they're kind of an afterthought. And so there's programs that just kind of haven't held it. But I don't know if I agreed with their list in totality. But as far as the Big 12 goes, I think there are some places that that aren't real impressive or not very scary to go play in. I think, Kansas being one of those. I mean, it was fairly intimidating at times last year just because they were pretty good and that place was full for once. But it's kind of spacious and it's just not intimidating. And you always go in there except for the one time when you block a field goal or extra point or whatever it was, you try to lateral it, and I don't want to relive that anymore. But other than that, you've gone and win every time. Your biggest problem there is, or used to be, there's almost nobody in the building, and now it's become a difficult place to play because it's just flat. The home team is used to it. We're having to manufacture our own energy, and we got a problem. We're in a game with a bad football team and all that, so it was a different reason for a different place to play. I've always had a healthy respect for whether the 0 degree game doesn't count because there was a lot of people missing. They were bad. There was a lot of people missing because of the temperature. But typically, Ames, Iowa is one of the most difficult places to play. One, because more often than not, they're either good or pretty good, always competitive. But their crowd is very animated. The other thing about playing there is it's one of the few natural grass fields left in this league.
Mm-hmm.
And they grow the grass up a bit. It's a bit of a different track, on what you're used to playing. And so there's some different things, but the crowd is extremely impressive. They should be, and their basketball thing, it's the same thing. It's very blue collar. And I think it's just a difficult place to go play and win at. I just think it is. I don't think Kansas State is typically like this intimidating atmosphere per se. I just think their team is always pretty good. That's the bigger problem there. The Iowa State crowd is more impressive to me. West Virginia is kind of somewhere in between. TCU just has a really loud sound system. It's not that big of a stadium. Baylor is mostly unimpressive to me personally as far as like intimidation. Oklahoma State is a pain to go play at. Oklahoma State is at or near the top of difficult places to play. That stadium is completely finished out, and I think they typically are putting 55 to 60 in there every Saturday. As we always talk about with Mike Gundy, they're always good to very good. You've won there, but not a lot. And I think that's but I think of the, BYU was impressive last year. Nighttime, their fans are very Iowa State-esque from engaged, show up early, really loud. The game ops stuff was very impressive. Their team just wasn't great, I didn't think. But people will tell you, and when they looked at this list, that Utah was ranked really, really low. I think Utah has quite the reputation of being an extremely difficult place to play. One, because they're good, they're coached well. Their stadium, much like BYU's, up on that mountain range, and I think it holds the noise in. So I think that's maybe going to be at or near the top of, So if you're asking me reputation, I think a lot of people would say Utah. I would tell you from what's, Oklahoma State, Iowa State, maybe two of the tougher places to play. Maybe I'm forgetting one off the top. I mean, I've been to Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado probably now is much more difficult to play than it was over the last 10 to 12 years. Just because they're excited there, but I've been to multiple games there, and it's just okay.
All right. Let us know in the YouTube comments where you see it the same, where you see it differently. If you have traveled to some of the locales, and if you're a fan of an opposing team whose feelings have been hurt during the course of this conversation, then let us know about that as well. We live here to fill up our Yetis with your tears. All right. Let's get on to question number 2.
First, today's episode brought to you by eBay Motors. And eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and keep that ride or die ride on the road, or elevate your car's game to the next level of performance. Superchargers, exhaust kits, LED headlights, roof racks, and accessories of all kinds to fit your style. Whether it's power, speed, or design you're into, eBay Motors has you covered with over 122 million parts to perfectly fit what you need. Just head over to ebay.com/motors now, where you'll always find exactly what you're looking for, and at no risk because of eBay's guaranteed fit. Your part is guaranteed to fit just right every time, or your money back, keeping you burning rubber and not burning cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to keep your ride or die on the road and moving your life forward at ebay.com/motors. eBay guaranteed fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply.
Chris, this has to do with some changes as far as rules for coaching and or a coaching staff, or developmental guys, I guess, coaching or being involved. This is from Glenn Clayton, who says, can you give us your view on the changes to coaching staffs or those that can coach? Does this mean unlimited coaches? And I wasn't even really sure. You call them coaches, or are these just guys that are previously in a non-coach role but now can have coaching contact? What's the change about, and how do you think it affects Texas Tech?
Yeah, so this is a new rule that they just they've been kind of pushing for this. It's the timing is so strange, because at a time when you're basically getting into, we may limit rosters, we may get rid of walk-ons and really limit how many players can be in your team. Let's by all means just say, hey, but by the way, you can have as many coaches as you want. There's rules in place where, like, you have the quote unquote analyst or the graduate assistant that can't really get out on the field and say certain things. They can't wear a headset on a game day. There's rules in place for a lot of this stuff, but I think basically they've kind of basically gone with the NFL model and said, do what you want. The one parameter that they've left in place is that I think you are still limited to, I guess it's 10 coaches or it's 11, which would include the head coach, on how many coaches you can allow to get out on the road and go recruit. So that is still limited. And that's where I would still qualify as those are like the straight up real assistant coaches. But now everybody else. So if you go hire the head coach that got fired, like if you're Nick Saban, who made created like what did they call it? Like Saban rehab or whatever they were calling it, coach rehab program, where all these head coaches would get fired and he'd scoop them up and like, give me your X's and O knowledge. Give me your personnel knowledge of these other teams and programs. You were in this league. Give me your knowledge. Well, now that individual would be allowed to go to get on the field and coach, which is, I mean, think about how Gary Patterson has been used in recent years. Well, now he can actually coach. Think about, Sean Sutton, for example, when Chris Beard was still here. Sean Sutton would now be able to coach, because I think this spills over into some other sports too, but we're talking football here. But it's a good thing for the graduate assistants and the analysts and folks like that are trying to break in. They get to do more. I think that some programs with a bigger bankroll will now probably try to flex a little bit, and you're going to start seeing group of 5 position coaches hired away and their salaries doubled to go, hey, come be here and be like an on-the-field coach, and you know what? You don't have to go recruit. And they're going to go, wait, hold on, time out. You're going to double my salary, and I don't have to get out on the road and go recruit? Like, that's a win-win. And so this is another, whether intended or unintended, this is going to be another kind of have and have not conversation that really is going to hurt the have not. If you're not in a Power 4 league and you don't have the general budget to be able to give an extra $80,000 to $150,000 to a few more folks, I think that you'll see that play out from that standpoint quite a bit. And I mean, you just think about how much more you could do with your staff in relationships and all that. But now they're allowed to coach, and and now if you're Texas Tech and your south end zone's been renovated, now you got office space for extra people too, if you want to fill it up. Yeah.
Yeah. Where you at, Bill Snyder? You bored? Looking for something to get into?
God, yes. I mean, absolutely.
I mean, we got a former player in the office down the hall, don't we? I think Kirby was overlapping a little bit with the Coach Snyder era. Come on down to Lubbock and drop some pearls on us. Yeah, that's really interesting. And I didn't think about sort of the unintended consequence of finding some of those guys in a group of 5 category or something else that maybe would be pretty enticed to, hey,
think about it. If I'm grinding away at it and I'm like beating my head against the wall at one of these lower levels and I've got all these things working against me, because some people just be like, man, yeah, I want to be a head coach. I want to be a coordinator or a head coach, or I want to have some say-so. Or I can go have a much better life with a lot of job security, and I can be around my wife and kids more or whatever. I mean, there's just going to be some people that make that decision. But think about it from this standpoint. Say after this year, what if you say, I've got a bunch of extra money around, let's go hire a coach. Wouldn't I go find a guy at a group of 5 school when I liked a lot of players on his roster? And I'm like, you know what? I like 7 or 8 of his guys. Let's go hire somebody that's got perfect relationships with all of them. And that's another unintended consequence, because that's going to go on too. You're going to see people hired just because they have relationships to, it's like hiring somebody's dad when their son is a really good player in basketball or football or whatever. It's same thing, or you're hiring Cade Cunningham's brother so you can get Cade Cunningham. Same
Danny
thing.
Manning's dad. Yeah. All these
Bingo.
examples.
So that part will play in too. Like, let's go hire the University of Tulsa, whatever. Cause we like a lot of the guys at University of Tulsa. I'm just using an example, but you get what I'm saying. But that's where this is really, and trust me, a lot of these Power 4 leagues, probably mainly in the Big Ten or SEC, are going to flex their muscle there as it relates to that. But I think that probably some Big 12 schools will do the same.
Really interesting to see how that's going to play out, and will be a change that probably goes sort of understated or underreported, at least for a period of time. But we may see it become front and center, a very big deal for some programs, for better or for worse. All right, good stuff. Appreciate those questions and appreciate the answers and insight as always, Chris. Enjoyed it, man. Have a great weekend.
You too, man. Appreciate it. Yeah, we always love the comments and the questions. It gets us talking about things that maybe we wouldn't normally do otherwise, but always appreciate the commentary and the comments from our loyal listeners. Guns up, everybody. Enjoy the weekend.
Yeah, and be back with us on Monday. It's going to be a wild week on the other side as we get into the 4th of July holiday. And I don't know, for some reason on Monday, I've just got fabrics on the brain. Maybe it'll dissipate by then, or maybe it'll become an even bigger deal. We'll see, but be sure to join us then so you don't miss anything. Get subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you're always in the know. And of course, the best way to help us grow the show is to comment anything below. So thanks to those that do that. Always appreciate the comments, the questions, or anything in between. For Chris, I'm Casey. Thanks for being out there, and we hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.